Welcome back guys to another Unreal Engine tutorial episode 2, and in this episode we are going to spawn our first buildable. So in the previous video we made materials for the preview of colors, we implemented our assets, and now we can start doing some blueprints. So let's open up our third person blueprint folder, blueprints, third person character. If you're using first person or whatever, just open your character blueprint. Now I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna launch my build mode on keyboard button B for now. I'm gonna adjust it later. So now keyboard B, select the B, there we go. And we need a few variables. So here on the left side I'm gonna add a variable and I'm gonna call this is build mode on. This is a boolean, we need to leave it as it is, and this is going to say whether our build mode is turned on or off. And now what we need to do is, if the button is pressed, on pressed, we need to do a if branch, and we need to check if the build mode is on. And if the build mode is on, we're going to turn it off. If the build mode is not turned on, we're going to turn it on. So basically this is going to be like a switch. B button like will turn the build mode on and off, and we need to set this to true. So what we can do next is, now we can do our line trace. So from the bottom one we need to drag and type in line trace by channel. Line trace by channel. Basically what this does, this is the thing that's going to shoot a direct line from point to point, from start to finish. And we need our camera now. So now drag in your camera or whatever object you want to be as a start position, but I'm gonna use camera so that it's always in the middle of the screen. I'm gonna drag from this and I'm gonna type get world location. And another thing that we need is we need to get forward vector. Basically this is going to give us the location of the camera, and this is going to shoot a direct line forward. So if you're using a first person template, all you gotta do now is you need to put this into the start, and for this one you need to multiply this with a float, so vector times float. And for the end position I'm gonna use like 1000 pixels in the front of the camera. If you want more or less, type your value, play with this. And one more thing we need to do, we need to add vector to vector, the other way around. So I'm gonna hold Alt and gonna click this pin to disconnect it. I'm gonna connect this to the bottom one and this one to world location, and I'm gonna put this at the end. So since I'm using a third person template, I don't want my line to shoot through my player, so I'm gonna select these, I'm gonna copy and paste, Ctrl C, Ctrl W, and I'm gonna connect these the same way as before. This is going to be our forward vector and this is going to be our world location. And here I'm gonna type 300. I'm thinking that this should be from the front of my character, and this is going to be our new start point. So it's gonna look like this. Looks a little messy, but we gotta work with what we have. So one more thing that we can do now is, for the testing purposes on this line trace by channel node, a little bit down here is draw debug type. Right now it's set to none. We're gonna set this for duration. So basically what this does, this is going to display the line. By default it's set to none so that it would be invisible, and in any game this is none. It's set to invisible so the player wouldn't see it, but we need to test it out. So let's click play, and every second time that we press B the line should appear. Every second, because one time we turn this build mode on and the second time we turn it off. So there we go, it works. Let's go back to our third person template character, and here in this trace channel, since we are going to start with the foundation, what I want to do is I want to select this trace channel and set this to foundation build, so that this thing would only detect the things that we want. I'm gonna show you later what I mean by that. So next thing we need to do, here we have some outputs, and the last one is a boolean, and we need to drag from it and type. I'm gonna type if, you can type branch because we need a branch, and we need to test if we have hit something. And one more thing we can do, from this out hit we can drag it and click break hit result, which is going to give us a lot of data about the distances, objects that we have hit, and so forth. And if we have hit something, we need to set this location. So I'm gonna create a new variable. I'm gonna call this build transform and transform and this variable type is going to be a transform variable. So if we have hit something, I'm gonna drag this and I'm going to set build transform. I'm gonna right click on the transform, I'm gonna split it so that now we have location, rotation, and scale. And if we haven't hit anything, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm also going to split this variable. And if we have hit something, then for the location I'm gonna use the impact point. But if we didn't hit anything, I'm gonna use the trace end. So like that. Now the next thing what we can do is we actually need a couple of functions now. So now we need to spawn our ghost. So I'm gonna create a new function and I'm gonna call this spawn build ghost. And in here I'm going to add an input, new parameter, and I'm gonna call this transform. Because we need a transform, we're gonna give this function our build transform. So now let's drag from the execution pin and type add static mesh component. So this is going to be our preview. So when you click this node here on the right side, you can change the static mesh, and I'm gonna type in foundation. So now we have our foundation, and in this relative transform I'm gonna connect this to our transform. Now once we have done that, we can drag from the return value and we need to promote to variable. Now it creates a new variable for us, and I'm gonna call this build ghost. This is going to be our build preview variable. Now we can compile and save this, and that's all we need right now. Now we can create another function, because now we need to set this color for our build ghost, and I'm gonna call the first function make build ghost green. So this is going to allow us to do the building, and we also need an input, and this also needs to be a transform. Now I'm gonna drag in our build ghost. I'm gonna click get, and we need to drag from it, and we need to set world transform. Set world transform, connect execution pins, and connect transform to new transform. Also what we need to do, since this is make build ghost green, we need to drag from this and we need to set material. Connect these, and now we need to select our green material that we created. I called it green, so here it is, green material. And we need one more variable, so I'm gonna create a new variable, and I'm gonna call this can we build, and I'm gonna change this to a boolean. And now I'm gonna add this at the end, and since this is green, this means we are allowed to build, so I'm gonna set this to true, compile and save, and that's it. Now what we can do is we can right click and press duplicate, or as you can see, we can select this and press Ctrl W, which is going to create this function again one more time. And I'm gonna rename this to make build ghost red. And here the only two things we need to do is we need to change this material to red, and we need to set this can we build to false, because once the preview is in red we are not allowed to build anymore. So now I'm gonna compile and save this, and we can go back to our event graph, to our build mode function. And now what we need to do now is we need to drag in our build ghost. We need to get this, and we need to do a check which is called is valid, and we need to check if this build ghost is spawned in game or not. And we need this node 2 times for both of the occasions when we have hit something and when we have hit nothing. So connect this, and now if our build ghost is not valid, we need to spawn build ghost. So now we can drag in this function, and if it is not valid we can connect these pins right like this. And for the transform we're going to use our build transform variable. Now if we have hit something and our build ghost is valid, we need to make build ghost green, and if we haven't hit anything and our build ghost is valid, we need to make this red, because I don't want to build in the air. So we can now connect these transform pins to our build transform, and if we compile and save this, go in our game, press B a couple of times, then this build will change locations. If it's in the air, it's not going to do anything. And as you can see now, it doesn't really follow the mouse. That is because we only run this function once, so it's going to be very, very glitchy, and we need to restart this function all the time. So I'm gonna put this aside a little bit so it's not that close, and we need a new function, event, and I'm gonna right click and type custom event, and I'm gonna call this build mode delay. From here I'm gonna drag from the execution pin, I'm gonna type delay, and this is going to be a small delay, let's say 0.1. And after this delay we need to do a if branch, and we need to check is the build mode on. If the build mode is on, we need to do a new custom event, and I'm gonna call this custom event, and I'm gonna call this restart build mode. And this event needs to be connected to this line trace by channel, so that if the build mode is turned on, we're going to do a restart, and basically what this does, it's going to loop this function all the time from this position, not from here, because here we are turning it on and off with the B key, but here is the actual build function. And now if the build mode is not turned on, we're going to make sure that it actually is turned off. So set build mode to false. Is build mode on? False. And we need to reset our transform. To do that you need to split these pins so that here would be these values. Otherwise, if it's combined, this is not gonna work. So split these. Also, just to make sure, we can set this can we build to false, and we need to drag in our build ghost, and we need to drag from it and say destroy component, because once we stop building we no longer need this component. Just to be safe, what we can do is I'm gonna type in is valid, because later on when we are actually able to build, sometimes the build ghost will be already destroyed. So we need to check whether it does exist in game, and if it does and it is valid, we can destroy it. Otherwise we don't have to do nothing at all, because the build ghost is already destroyed. So we have our build delay. I'm gonna select everything, press C and type build delay to make it visually more appealing. And here where we have all of our ends, make build ghost green, make it red, spawn it, At the end of it, I'm going to drag from one of these and I'm going to type in build mode delay. And I'm going to connect all of these pins to a delay. So basically what this does, we're going to launch our build mode. It's going to go through here. It's going to spawn our build ghost. It's going to go through the delay. It's going to see that it is turned on and it's going to reset the function. It's again going to get our locations and it's going to color our ghost depending on the situation. So now we can compile and save this. Go in game, press B, and voila, we have our foundation. If you put it in the air, it doesn't work. If you put it on the ground, it does work. Now you can see there is a lot of these annoying lines and they keep on spawning because it is resetting every 0.1 second. We can go back to our build mode, and here under the line trace by channel we can change this draw debug type back to none, and this is going to remove these lines. So we're back to normal again. So that's going to be it for this tutorial. We have our preview, and in the next tutorial we are going to make it buildable. See ya!